Hello, good afternoon. We're back with the class on sociology of development. The topic that I would like to discuss today is on development and poverty. So basically, what um, I will be doing is to share uh, with you some of the um, issues with regard to poverty and development. Okay. As you can see from here, um, we will be basically look into the linkages between the two concepts, yeah, the concept of poverty and also development. All right. So the lecture is actually consisted of two broad parts. Yeah, part one will be basically looking at how poverty and human development are linked up with economic development. Okay. In other words, we look at some of the historical perspective on economic development and also its impact on poverty. And then part two will be on how poverty are being linked up with the human development. All right. Last week we talked about the human development approach to development, and this week we will look at the linkage or the relationship between poverty and also human development as well. Okay. Looking at history, if we look at the economic history of the modern world, it started with the Industrial Revolution, yeah, somewhere in the 17th century. Now, factory-based industrial production came into being, and markets also expanded as a result of that. Yeah, so there is a division of labor because of the large-scale production. There was a need for a division of labor which promote the production of goods in big quantities, and also because of that as well, there was a larger surplus, yeah, of goods and also services, leading to greater capital accumulation, or in other words, um, more money, yeah, earned from uh, the goods that's produced in the factory. And besides that, also there was an increase in investment in also production capacity, as well as at the end of the day, the growth in the income of the country. Okay. So the economy was gradually transformed from primarily agriculture to an industrial economy. One of the famous theory of economic development is the one by Arthur Lewis. Lewis model is basically talking about structural change. Otherwise, it's commonly called structural change model of development. Right. So, according to Lewis, the surplus labor in the rural sector or in the agriculture sector are being mobilized, yeah, used in the urban industry, or using the surplus labor to set up industry in the urban areas. So there is a shift yeah, from the agriculture sector in terms of labor to a newly set up industry. Okay, so this in turns will set in process of industrialization and income growth. Right. So the result, according to Lewis' theory, is um, an increase in the income or the GDP of the country as the country is shifting from agriculture sector to industrial sector. And most of the experiences of the developed nations now, of the already developed nations, um, mostly or broadly match this story. Yeah, story of the the change from the agriculture sector to the industrial sector. So the success of these countries actually has been through the process of industrialization and mobilization of the uh, surplus labor from the rural and agricultural sector. Okay, so however, country experiences of exactly how agriculture surplus get mobilized and led to industrialization. There are some differences, in other words, they differ. Yeah, it's not quite the same from country to country, but the process itself is very much the same. Yeah? So Britain, for example, they went through a process of industrialization. United States as well, or USA, Japan, Soviet, Russia, also had their own model experiences as well, right? But as I said, the process of mobilizing the labor from the agriculture sector uh, were happening everywhere, yeah, among those developed countries. Okay, now there is this uh, issue of capital growth paradigm of economic development. So, capital growth paradigm is the growth in the capital, the growth in the wealth of a nation. Yeah, it happened because um, of the productions we have seen early on, increase the production and so on. So more goods are being produced. So that leads to higher saving rate among the population of the country. And then with higher saving rate the country has, that will uh, uh, the country can have a higher investment rate as well. Yeah, so more money in the saving are used for investment, and um, that will lead to higher income growth and overall higher income growth, and gradually it will lead to higher consumption level for the nation as a whole. So everybody seems to be, or most people seems to earn a higher income. Yeah, so they can consume more. Yeah, so that is considered as good for the country as well. Okay. So the question is whether or not, or does a higher overall income rate mean that higher income level for all? That's a real good question to ask actually. Does everybody enjoy the high income, or is it just limited to the few you know groups of people and so on? And from the experience of countries during the 1960s, most developing countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America, all of them experience income growth along with rising income inequality. So what is peculiar is the fact that as the income grows, yeah, GDP growth and so on, grow. At the same time, there was a rising income inequality. In other words, the difference between the rich and the poor seems to be increasing at the same time. Yeah, income inequality. And number two, in most of these countries, the incidence of absolute poverty also increase as well. Right? So the question is whether development is good, right? Increase in income, yes, of course it is good. But at the same time, there was a greater incidence of absolute poverty, yeah, among these countries. Yeah, people who are really poor, who could not afford, the basic necessities and so on. Okay, so according to Simon Kuznets, Simon Kuznets is an economist actually, and he economist and also a scholar. He came up with a hypothesis in which he said, with rising per income, this is what the hypothesis says, with rising per capita income inequality will also rise first, yeah? It will rise first and then start declining after a threshold income level has been crossed. In other words, after a certain level of income, then you will see a decline in the income inequality. That's his hypothesis. Now, what's the experience in many countries? Yeah? Um, According to his study, many countries experiences corroborated or confirmed his hypothesis or Simon Kuznets hypothesis. Yeah. Um, so there was enough data to prove that what he said, what he believed to be, is that the rising per capita income leading to inequality at first, and then the inequality will um, later on will drop, yeah, as the income level of the country uh, increase. So, okay, so in terms of policy implication of this hypothesis or Kuznets hypothesis, is that the important thing to do is that if there is an intervention, the intervention needed to improve the income distribution. Yeah, income distribution must be improved, and that will alleviate poverty of the population in that particular country. Okay, all right. So, so in 1970s, yeah, poverty took up the center stage of development. Yeah, discussions in the late 1970s. Right? Poverty became something that was very much talked about. Yeah, people discuss on that as far in terms of development. Yeah? Um, and then the concept of poverty also in terms of food was seen in terms of food security as well. Yeah, whether there is going to be enough food supply and so on, and then also in terms of nutritional inadequacy. So poverty is seen in terms of consumption, in terms of food. Yeah, whether food is available, and in addition to that is in terms of the nutrition. Yeah, content of the food. Yeah, so that concept, yeah, evolved. Uh, so along with per capita income, actually, an income inequality measure, incidence of poverty became a major development indicator. So one of the indicator of development is the incidence of poverty. So what it means is that if the incidence of poverty is less, that would mean that the country is uh, better in terms of development, right? So that's one of the indicator or one of the measure of development, yeah, or maybe a measure of lack of development for that matter. Okay, so this is an example um, of data actually from the World Bank Development Indicators in 2008. So what you can see here is the percentage of people or percent of people in the world at different poverty levels. In other words, the level of poverty line or poverty, level of poverty change quite drastically, or it's dynamic in the sense that this year maybe the line poverty is is lower. Next year could be higher, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Um, So, for example, if the poverty line, for example, the amount of US dollars a day, yeah, um, to live, in other words, yeah, if it is $1, the percentage of um, people who are living in poverty is just slightly above 10%. However, as the poverty line increases, for example, over the years, right now I think the poverty line is about $1 25 cent, $1.30, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So what you can see from here is that as the level of or the threshold of the line poverty line increases, the um, the greater is the proportion of people in poverty, right? As a result of the cost of living and so on. Yeah. So um, it correlates with the level of development. In other words, as a country develops, as you know, the income increases and so on, suddenly you will see also there is an increase in um, the number of people in poverty as well. Okay, so this is example where you could see um, the map showing the distribution, the percent of population living under one US dollar per day. Okay, so where do you see poverty around the world? Yeah. So those in red or dark red or brown color, those are with higher rate of poverty, right? And most of these countries are in Africa. There are, of course, other countries which doesn't have the data, so it's not included there. Right? So countries which is of light color or yellow or darker yellow, those are countries with um, less percentage of people living in poverty. Okay, and the one in blue, for example, that include Malaysia. So Malaysia has poverty, or people living in poverty, about 2 to 5% of the Malaysian population. Okay, just to show you a few. Also another map um, showing about the same thing, where this is more detailed, right? The previous map is quite is not complete, but this one shows throughout the world, where you can see the distribution of people or countries with percentage of people below poverty line. Okay, so again, most of those countries which are in which people are living below poverty line, yeah, are rather in Africa, some in Latin America, and also this country here, which is I think this is Pakistan, yeah, on this side, yeah, and Nepal as well. Okay, so that's the distribution in the world. And this graph here shows the percentage of population living on less than $1.08 per day. Now this figure actually changes, as I said, changes from time to time. It tends to be to increase, yeah, by the day. So this year it could be for example, $1.25. Next year could be $1.30, depending on the uh, purchasing power parity, yeah, the value of money and the cost of living. So, but anyway, what I wanted to show you here is the fact that most of those countries who are living with less than $1.08 per day, those in the sub-Saharan Africa, the brown color there. Then followed by countries in South Asia, which include Bangladesh, in India, you know, and so forth, yeah, those South Asian countries, and also East Asia, for example, which include Malaysia. We are the one down here, the blue color. Okay, so in the mid, as a result of that, in mid, now I have mentioned this last week on the human development approach to development, whereby Professor Amartya Sen, um, where he believed that, yeah, who came up with the idea, theory on the notion of human welfare in terms of now famous entitlement, capabilities, and functioning concepts and so on. Yeah. So in brief, according to Professor Amartya Sen, the welfare or well-being derives from consumption of goods and services. In other words, people are well or well taken care of if they have enough of goods and services. So that's the welfare, the well-being, yeah, of the people. And also talking about entitlement, yeah, access to consumption requires entitlement in terms of purchasing power or procuring goods and services for consumptions. Yeah, in other words, how do you get those goods? How do you get those services? Yeah, how do you have the power to? Do you have the means? Yeah, uh, to get those goods and services. Number 4 is talking about capabilities, which is quite related to entitlement. But this is talking about how do you get the entitlement from something? Do you get it through education? Do you get it through better health? Do you get it through being informed? Yeah, and all this um, will help to convert consumption into welfare. Yeah, all right. So these are necessary according to Amartya Sen. Okay, and if you lack entitlement or you're lacking capabilities, that is according to Professor Sen, is defined to be a violation of proper functioning. In other words, you can't function properly without having the entitlement, without having the capabilities. So it's a new concept, relatively, but it's something quite interesting. Yeah. All right. And his, more or less his colleague, yeah, Professor Mabuk Al-Haq, which I talked about last week, also more or less concretized and implemented human development, yeah, as a measure of, as a measurable concept. Yeah. In other words, they believe that the human development can be measured, yeah? Not just measuring how much money, how much income is on, but it should be measuring, including something else that we have seen last week in terms of what I call longevity, or how long people can live, yeah, um, lifespan and all that, and in terms of education, yeah, and so on. Okay, so as a core concept, human development encompasses three basic dimensions, and that we have seen last week. Number one is income, yeah, because income is the means for you to get or to buy or to access, yeah, uh, whatever you need, food or whatever. Then health. Yeah? Health is important because if you're not healthy, then you can't work, and because you can't work, you're not earning. Right? So health is very important, and literacy. Yeah, your education. Yeah, which is also very very important, at least in the modern day. Yeah. So in the index of human development, which is an aggregation of the three component or three dimensions just now, income, health, and literacy. So it is a micro measure of development. In other words, it's a bigger measure, yeah, of development rather than just focusing on income alone. So it is a macro measure development or lack of it for a given community of people. Right? So very important new concept as far as measuring um, development in the countries. Yeah? So previously, as I said, development is measured in terms of income. So these other two are almost neglected. Yeah? Right. So many other dimensions also were added in. For example, gender discrimination, environmental or environment and ecology, human rights, governance, and so on. Yeah, all those are also thought to be ingredients of human development as well. So it has been revised uh, from time to time. Yeah, so, and all this have are taken into consideration and brought into the ambit of its discussion and measurement as well. So some of these are not easily measurable, but it's something that has been added in as part of what people now call human development. Okay, so human development, which has income growth and inequality, uh, is only one of the many dimensions. Yeah, so it's clearly a much broader, comprehensive concept of economic development. So human development is indeed much more comprehensive, broader concept of economic development. Okay, right. So that's part one of our lecture. Yeah. So I'm going to the second part, and this is not going to be a very long one. So the second part here is looking into how poverty is being linked up with human development. Okay, so originally in the past, as I said, um, development has been measured mostly looking at or measuring income, yeah, or consumption. Okay, so at the same time, yeah, poverty also was used to be viewed as unidimensional or one dimension, relating to the inadequacy of income or not enough income or not enough consumption. Okay, if you lack in income, if you lack in consumption, you are considered as living in poverty. So typically, a conventional absolute poverty then measure absolute poverty measure would count the number of persons, yeah, the number of persons in in a given community having income or consumption below a threshold level. So if the income falls below a certain level or the consumption falls below a certain level, then um, those people will be considered as below or poverty. Yeah? Those categorized as poor. Okay. For example, if the threshold level is often is the threshold level that has often been used is known as the poverty line. Yeah. In other words, the income level below which a household is considered living in poverty. Right now in Malaysia, I haven't seen the latest figure, but between Semenanjung and Sarawak and Sabah, there are a little bit of difference in terms of the poverty line. Yeah, I think in Sarawak it's probably slightly higher than in Semenanjung. Um, it could be 800 plus ringgit a month um, per a family of 5% per household. Okay, so if a family is earning less than that, then that family is considered poor. Okay, or if you look at consumption, for example, and then if you consume, for example, less than, I'm just putting this number here, less than $1.25 US dollar per day per capita, that would mean that you are also considered as poor, yeah, living in poverty. All right, so that's, as I said, two ways to look at absolute poverty is one is to use the income level or poverty line, or the other one is to look at the consumption level. Okay, so that is the two threshold, the threshold level that is used to count the number of persons. Yeah. So poverty is multidimensional, right? It's not just about money alone. Yeah, it's not just about food on the table. Yeah. So now people are looking at other dimensions of poverty, and that include nutrition. Yeah, food, not just food, but also the quality of food, the nutrition, nutritional intake, and so on. Second one is the health. Yeah, uh, whether you're healthy or not, and so on. That is also taken into account. And also housing, yeah, is also another dimension that people look at when they measure poverty and so on. Whether the condition of the house is good, poor, and so on. Yeah. The clothing, yeah, the cloth that you wear, and so on. Importantly, also education or access to education is also measured as one of the dimensions as well that is taken into consideration and measured in the index as well. And also knowledge and information are regarded as the various relevant dimensions as well. So all of these are something which is new, which was not taken into account before when one was measuring poverty. So this is more inclusive, yeah, and more comprehensive. Okay, so one may define poverty in respect of each dimension separately, and a comprehensive overall measure of poverty may be defined. So one can measure, what it means is one can use nutrition, for example, yeah, food, for example, to define poverty, but that is just one aspect of it. So you can combine, yeah, according to what we've seen earlier on, you can combine all these factors and come up with a um, uh, new definition, yeah, of poverty based on those various dimensions. Okay, so since the component of human development constitute poverty dimensions, therefore poverty and human development become closely related notions. Yeah, that's how um, the link, yeah, between human development and poverty. Okay, so basically that's what I wanted to share with you on this uh, issue of development and poverty. Yeah, so um, I just want to end here is that the eradication of poverty and related issues are also emphasized in the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have seen these Sustainable Development Goals earlier on. Yeah, so um, yeah, so poverty is part and parcel of development. So is development the cause of poverty, or is it the lack of development that causes poverty? So it can be both. Yeah? So when we talk about development, we have to be concerned about uh, trying to eradicate poverty, and not just simply just to increase the income or the GDP of the country, but also we're talking about the distribution of the income so that everybody in the country should enjoy, high income uh, and better lives and so on. Yeah, standard of living. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So that's the end. I'll see you again in our next lecture.